All right, so why don't we jump in?
Yeah.
Welcome to Let's Get Real with HR. And today we have Alexander Ali Dalipi joining us. My name is Constantine Sky. And let's dive into it. So do you prefer going by Alexander, Alexander Ali, Alex, Ali? I've
Yeah.
seen quite a few variations in your email signatures.
It's so funny though. Honestly, if most of my clients all ask me this, like, oh my God, what do we call you? Right. And I'm like, well, if I'm in trouble, I'm probably going to go by Alexander Ali Dalipi. If you're a good friend of mine and you really don't care, you'll probably call me Alex. I'm trying to get a little bit more, clean cut and be called Alexander or Alexander Ali, kind of like, Jean-Luc or like Marianne, right? Or,
Nice.
although it's a mouthful. So honestly, I say, depending on your mood, go with it.
All right. I'll go with Alex. You said your friends call you that, so hopefully we can become friends as we continue meeting each other. But yeah, it's like I've kind of been in the same boat. At some point, I decided that people will call me Constantine, and then it changed into K, and then some people from grad school and from college call me Co. And
Wow.
I'm really, really confused whenever I hear Co, just because I'm so not used to it ever since I graduated. But thank you for being on the podcast. Of course, I have a little bit of the introduction in here. So you spent quite a bit of time building out your company, HR1 Systems, that focuses on the HRIS. You're also are pursuing your EDD in particular, and you're based out of New York, right?
Yep, I'm actually out of New Jersey, right across the water from World Trade Center.
Okay. And around your company, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah.
What do you all do?
Yeah. So I've been, we're a boutique consulting firm that is based out of here in New York and in the US. I've been around for over 7 years. So a day in the life of my career, I started out in HR as an HR coordinator about 22 years ago. And don't do the math, please. And then, moved up in the ranks. Ended up becoming a generalist and a senior generalist and a manager. And then the company that I was working with, they actually sold the company, and all of us that got sold, that got acquired, we all got laid off, and then we all got these huge severances because we had a really nice ESOP program, which is employee stock ownership plans. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this money? And so I went. So I was like, okay. I spent about 6 months in Europe, and then I literally applied to my master's program at Villanova University. And then while I was doing school there, and then I ended up switching over to an online program for them, which is an amazing program. Full course exam, same like if you're on site. So they were kind of one of the first pioneering universities to actually do an online program, but with the same level of credentials and credits as being on campus, right? So I was like, yeah, let's do this. Online, travel, go to Europe, travel the world and study at the same time. So it was great. So, and of course I had that money from the acquisition. So it was really great. Came back last semester before graduating. I got a really great job working at a Wall Street investment brokerage firm here in in near World Trade Center on Wall Street. Did that for about 4 years as the head of HR they were also a boutique firm. And then after a while, I finished school. I built an HR department from ground zero. I was an HR department of 1 and brought in 2 other people. So it was staff of 3. And then at that point, I just turned around to my COO and I said to him, I was like, boss man, I'm bored. I want something else to do. And I have always had an academic background. I've always been, a nerd. I taught for the last 4 years now at Baruch College as well as Lehman College, which is now where I'm at doing my doctorate in education, focused on organizational change and leadership. My focus is actually going to be on followership. So I'm kind of going. I'm going to take in a taboo or kind of go on the flip side of that yin yang environment for leadership.
Yeah, I definitely would love to have you back and talk about that. But today we're talking about HRIS space. So how did you end up in the HRIS space? It sounds like there's a lot of HR leadership, there's a lot of education and traveling the world, and Europe in particular. But HRIS, it seems to be quite a dry topic, and one of those things that HR professionals sort of like hold their head wherever they hear it.
Yeah, so it requires a lot of data analysis and a lot of analytics and a lot of heavy Excel data crunching. And so right before the whole people analytics boom in the HR environment in industry, I started just really doing a lot of data analytics using VBA formatting, Power Query. But before it was called Power Query, it was just the back end VBA, and I loved the fact that I was able to create all of these analytics that were correlating and related to cost benefits, base compensation, total compensations, benefits, right? And then turnovers and performance reviews. And I was actually able to do a lot of correlations between performance reviews and turnovers or people quitting versus, doing other areas of that sort. So at one point when I told my boss, I was getting bored because I designed the models. I had all the templates. It was great year after year. It was doing really well. But it wasn't really, going anywhere because the company's small. So, it's not going to continue to grow. So what do I do? And so one of my sales reps at one of our vendors, she's like, I really love that you're amazing at this. You do really well. I implemented their HRS and payroll softwares 2 times with other clients prior years. And then all of a sudden she's like, you know what? You're really great. You've been such an amazing referral. Like you've been getting us like a lot of deals. You've been very helpful. Can you do this on your own, like a side gig? And I was like, no. I'm like, would I ever do something? Like, I mean, like,
You said no.
I mean, I was young in my early 30s, right? Young.
Okay.
And I was like, how do I do this? Right. So, I took a chance. I talked to my COO. I said to him, hey, I'm bored. I want to do some things. I told him I have an opportunity to do some side gigs. And, he's like, I don't know about that. I mean, he's totally supportive, totally do it. Go with it, run with it. I did one project. It was really, really cool. And then I got another bigger project. And my COO was like, listen, I can't stop you from pursuing your career. This sounds like a really great opportunity. You have my blessings. He goes, just give me, at least 1 month notice. And I gave him 2.5 months notice, and I closed out the year for him. And then I transitioned over. And then of course, here we are 7 years later.
All right. You talk quite a bit about analytics, actually. Do you identify as a people analytics person?
No, I identify myself as a data analyst.
Okay. It's actually like an interesting question because I don't think we ever ask anyone, do you identify as a people analytics person? Although I would imagine that some people might identify you as a people analytics person without necessarily you like raising your hand and saying, it's like, hey, I'm in people analytics.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I was always a data analyst from like, of course I was the head of HR, right? But when I was crunching
Mhm.
data, I was really like being that data analyst because being on Wall Street, all of our analysts were data analysts, right? All of my financial analysts, right? They were all analysts. So I was like, wow, man, we didn't have a word like people analytics at that time, right? Now I'm dating myself. But
Well,
yeah, at that time, it was like, oh man, what should I do? I was like, I guess I'm just a data analyst. And then so through time, that was right when people analytics and HR was transitioning from administrative and very operationals to more strategic and leadership roles, right? And that's when we transitioned from, just an administrator to now analytics. Oh, wow. People analytics. And then that whole cultural change in the HR went from human resources to now people and culture departments, right? And so that's where I came in. So I don't know. I still feel like I'm a little bit of old school. I still like most of my analysts all have computer science degrees on my team. So are we people analytics? I don't know. We're as a consulting company, we go in, we crunch a lot of data for them. We optimize and implement their payroll and HR systems. So we really want those people analytics titles to be within in-house HR departments in corporations, not as from like a consultant's perspective. But who knows? That could always change.
yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, actually, because I was starting to think, what is the difference actually between data analysts and a people analytics person? Is it just titling at the end of the day?
That's a really great question. A few months ago, a few years ago, I was part of the Hacking HR for the New York chapter, and
Mm.
I was the leader for this division, or this location. And we did one of our actual on site right before COVID took over, and we actually did a whole seminar on what's the definition between a data analyst and a data scientist, because back then people analytics wasn't around. So we were like, how do we differentiate between data scientists and data analysts? So when we did a deeper dive in them, we understood that being a data scientist was more focused on computer science, right? Computer coding, right? Understanding how to create algorithms, right? And then applying those algorithms or those different types of languages into a department or an industry, right? So then that's when data science kind of started funneling over into analysts. So then when we talk about what is the definition of data analyst, well, it's the sister partner of a data scientist, but we're doing more of the data analysis and the crunching. So we're not building the algorithms to produce the data. We're actually utilizing the data and creating stories about them and stories around the data to give back to leadership from a strategic point of view.
So, based on your definition and based on what I've heard about people analytics more generally, right? It's like the actual analysis, working with the data, producing some sort of reports, creating stories and narratives around the data. A lot of people analytics people actually fall on the data analyst spectrum a lot more than data scientists per se.
100%. It's really hard to learn programming if if you don't have that brain wiring, if I can kind of say it that way, right? So, it's not, it's really, let me think about this. So, right now in our industry, we're coming up to the challenge of creating very unique like macros or types of code in order to replicate or to produce data that is very mundane, right? Versus versus like having to just do the manual stuff. So from our perspective, right now, like I told you earlier, all my analysts actually have computer science backgrounds, right? So they all
That's right.
know, yes, they all know Python or R or SQL. So in our industry, we use SQL as our language program to use, because that's really where our data houses or data storage is at. And then we just use SQL coding or SQL scripts to actually extract the data and create a whole bunch of tables and and different fancy
Mhm.
tables. However, now what we're trying to do is introduce our studio coding, right?
Okay.
Yes, we can create tables, but SQL can't create pretty visualizations, right?
Mhm.
Presentations, graphs, charts, etc. Our studio is able to take the big data information and then actually visualize it. So now and from a coding perspective, we can actually make it more elegant and create stories out of those presentations with linked to the actual data. So it's kind of like the next evolution of like SQL coding or SQL script writing to the next level with your databases that you have, right? You still need the foundation of SQL databases, but the next step is you can bring them into our studio to create those really cool visualizations. Because at the end of the day, in human resources or people and culture, we're strategic now. We're not very operational or administrative, right? So if I circle this all back,
We want to be. We
we
want to
want
be,
to be.
right? It's like
We want to be strategic, not
that's right.
administrative. We've been
That's right.
administrative for over 50 years, right? So since we changed our name from personnel administrators, right, to human
Mhm.
resources, and now we've taken the next evolutionary step, right, to people and culture, right? I just
That's
can't
right.
wait till we see the next evolution with AI. What do we call ourselves after that? Do we call ourselves human bots? Are we human bots?
Well, that's definitely interesting, right? Because what is AI going to do overall to the entire organization, and how is the organization going to look like? Is a big question, of course. But around the work that you do, so there is a part of it that focuses on actual narrative generation, but
Mm.
there's also a part where you're getting invited by the organizations to run optimizations of their HRISs, and largely that signals to me that the big problem right now that's happening for many organizations is that their HRIS is very much disorganized. Which I have seen in my practice as an operator, and switching to HRIS, but also in my consulting practice and advising the different clients. So, I wanted to touch a little bit about that, and perhaps you can talk about some of the core issues with the HRIS right now that organizations are trying to address.
Yeah, I have two really great extreme case studies that I'm working on right now.
Okay,
Two different clients of mine that I have. I'm not going to say who they are. hopefully,
of course not.
hopefully after this podcast, I still have a job. So the left side of the spectrum is they have done an amazing job of optimizing their system, from dashboard visualizations to easy, quick links to really well reporting and scheduled reporting and correlations, and being able to create trends with the history that they have in the system. Now, the reason why they were very successful is because they utilized us as their consulting partner to be able to bring in that data, but fill in the gaps of the data that was missing during the legacy system. So when we pulled the data out, it wasn't just data out and data in. And there's some other meaner words that people in the industry say when you pull data out. And if you just don't do anything with it, you just put it into the next system, right? So we're going to be polite and say, unfortunately, bad data out, bad data in, right? So what we've done is we really worked really closely with that company.
I'm like, I can say it: garbage out, garbage in, garbage out.
Hey, you're the host. Go for it.
So yeah, so I did not rate this podcast R-rated, but I think these terms can be quite acceptable. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. So and with them and their story, it's really great because so this case study I'm working on, their example is a very far extreme where they really optimized the system, but we had a really great partnership and they allowed us to really clean their data. So when we extracted the data, we filled in so many of the blanks that were missing. Then we put it into the system. It was a really complete data set and being brought in. That's why the graphs and the charts and the emails and the dashboards worked so well and were so efficient and produced really well, beautiful reports and visualizations, right? Bring it to the other side of the spectrum, right?
Is this a different client?
Different client.
Okay.
So now, parallel, different client, right?
So client number one, missing data.
Client number one, missing data, but allowed us the opportunity to fill in the gaps and really clean up the data, but make their data set whole. Okay. So if we go now to the other side of the client, same population size, same number of HR people, I would say same number of titles and I guess positions within HR, right? And then executive, right? And then same two different software systems that they brought out. That's one outliner that I could see, but they brought it into the same vendor, right? So that they upgraded to. Didn't make time for meetings, didn't want to schedule training sessions with us where we do kind of like tricks to the trade with the software to kind of help them out, because that's one of our specialties with our boutique firm is we really love knowledge transfer and really teaching them how to fish and how to really maximize the system. Didn't make time for that. We asked them to clean their data. We asked them to fill in the blanks. They're like, just leave it alone. We just don't want to mess around with the data, which is fine. Oh, that's very valid statement. Sometimes you don't want to touch legacy data. You want to keep legacy data the way it actually originally comes in, right? But the problem is that if you keep in, there's all these gaps. What do you do with these gaps? Well, then unfortunately, your charts, your graphs, your reports, your analytics, turnover reporting numbers kind of look weird. They get skewed a little bit because you have all these gaps missing, or you have these random outliers of, termination reason is, voluntary, involuntary versus blank, 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 right? Performance review versus, left for another job opportunity, or blank, 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 right? So, as a PhD yourself, when you're working with a lot of data sets, if you get all these NAs, what happens to your data set? It becomes the reliability.
It's inconclusive.
Very inconclusive, right? And that's what ends up happening with the technology. Now, if we're not an academic and we're talking about real numbers, as an as an HR professional in this people and cultural environment where HR or people analytics or the professionals here are strategic leaders. But if you're missing a lot of data, you can't tell a really good full story, right? So what
That's
is
right.
your worth, or what do you bring to the table at that executive level? Ooh, not so much, right? And so that company has been stumbling and stumbling and stumbling with a lot of frustrations, where the other one is like, oh my God, they were so happy. So I tell one client, my God, you're putting me out of a job. And I tell the other client, my God, I'm going to be with you forever. So I guess these are kind of my two extremes. If I were to kind of say the challenges that I've seen, and one of the challenges we face in HRIS, or human resource information systems implementations.
So what's a big barrier for decline number two?
Yeah, bandwidth.
Mhm.
They're overworked, and some of them are underskilled, or some of them, I think they're uh, leadership. I mean,
Mhm.
when you don't have a really strong leader that invests in the product that you're purchasing, implementations are not cheap. They're cost
No,
for the
they're not.
company, for the firm, right? So if you don't really take the time to invest in it, and you're not a real good leader, and not in the leader sense of you're doing the work yourself, but like being, hey team, you need to allocate time, and we're allocating our time. We're going to reshuffle our workloads, our priorities. Let's get it in there and let's get it doing. Well, what ends up happening is I think when they bring in a consulting company like mine, I kind of handicap them a little bit.
Mhm.
And that's why with our firm, we really pride ourselves in knowledge transfer. We don't want to
That's right.
we'll do the grunt work and initially, but once we get that grunt work done, immediately we try to switch over into training and development, and knowledge transfer, and really teaching them the system, tricks to the trade of the software to get them to that next level. And I think that's where it's like, well, all right, the system's ready, it's working, we got it. Let's move on. It's like, no, you really can maximize. There's so much potential in technology, right?
Mhm.
And it kind of circles back to the AI world too. Well, if you don't really know how to maximize your system, you don't have good, clean data in the system, will the AI really function? I mean, right now,
Mhm.
Chat GPT is struggling through producing fake data, or fake essays, or fake stories, right, or fake information, right? Because
That's right. That's right.
it's just making it up because it doesn't have parameters. It doesn't know how to kind of fact check itself. Well, same thing. What would happen if AI starts coming in, creeping into the organizations, replacing these jobs, or replacing these roles that we don't have? Well, if there's not good clean data, right, if it's not accurate data, reliable data, well, your AI is
Mhm.
also not going to function. So I think I just figured out how we all still keep a job in HR.
All right. So do tell. Do tell.
That's it. Good being able to bring the data and analyze the data, and that really comes into your line of industry as well, and kind of what I love. And earlier we talked about how you did your homework on me. I mean, I've been stalking you for almost 2 years now. So I really have been. I really appreciate a lot of your methodology, a lot of your approach to data, a lot of your approach to sometimes dry data, dry information, dry workload that is required but necessary. But still, you make it fun. You make it more like dynamic. Like, hey, let's rethink about how we do some of these things. And I just love your posts. I just read them. I'm like, they're so clean, straightforward. I'm like, this is what my dissertation professor keeps telling me: keep it simple, keep it clean. And so I go back to your LinkedIn post, ironically, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, this is right now I need to write my dissertation.
Yeah, I actually appreciate it. It's like my dissertation was, I think, 60, maybe 80 pages. It was very straightforward, and it was an overview, I wouldn't say of 8 studies
Mm.
conducted in there. But yeah, it's like I love that style that is straight to the point and just gets the clarity across. And from the HR perspective, I think it's very important from the data standpoint, because it's a very complicated subject, and one of those subjects that they don't traditionally teach in a, I don't know, HR certification programs. They might touch upon it once in a while, talk a little bit about data, and more in the sense of here's what's possible, but not necessarily here's how you roll up the sleeves and actually get into the data and organize your HRIS. So this is where I'm wondering if part of the sort of issue is that resistance that is created mentally, perhaps like some sort of mental block between analytics and HR as professionals. Like, do they mesh together or do they not mesh together? Like, is there something about the identity, or is there something else at play in here that's generating this very slow movement forward?
Two comments on that one. And,
Okay.
and to all the millennials out there, don't come for me, okay? First one is social media. I think social media has created such a problem with our younger generations with attention span and attention to detail as well. And then there is a huge culture clash with the Gen Z, the Gen X's, and the older generations from coming from attention to detail, going slow, taking time to actually make sure your T's are crossed and I's are dotted, right? And so from that perspective, where is kind of like that disconnect? I was just talking to another client of mine. He's like, I hired an intern I just needed him to do basic V lookups in Excel. And he's like, a V what? I'm like, well, now it's called X lookup. so I just took it next level for my client. And he was like, wait, what? I was like, no, I'm joking. Bad joke. And so, his frustration was, intern right out of the university, and it's actually here. It's here in New Jersey that I'm here, and I'm actually reaching out to the chair department, the department chair in the business management office to see if I can come in there and kind of do some guest lectures and kind of talk to them. Hey, this is some of the skills that you need to look for, and these are some of the skills you should focus in on when you're coming into the market. Because you're right, in school and academia, it's always very theoretical. And there's not a lot of practicalities or empirical, unless you're purely talking in the sciences, right? Then of course, you go into a lab, right? How do you go into a lab for Excel? How do you go into a lab to create a PowerPoint presentation, right? How do you go into a lab to be able to do this stuff? Now, don't get me wrong, real programs like data analysts programs or degrees, but that's the last 5, maybe 10 years that those degrees have been out in the market now. So are they really going into those? No. A lot of people are probably they want to do their MBA, right? Or they want to do their bachelor's in business administration, right? So they get a course there, right? Do they really know how to focus in it? Probably not. 2, it's too a little mathematical, too numbers oriented. Majority of people, or I would say, if you look at population, again, don't quote me on any of this stuff. I'm not factual, and have to fact check me all you want. I'll probably be 99% wrong, right? But at least from my observations, it's been people are very creative. People love, especially, with the social media, stuff like that. It's really creating content, but how do you do the numbers on the back end? And this is why I really love STEM programs, science program. And I have a bachelor's in physics myself. So kind of have that kind of discipline, from an earlier time. So if we kind of bring it back, what would we see from a resistance or challenge? I think it would be that I would not blaming anybody, but it's just how do we kind of get out of this whole theoretical, oh my God, let's look at these really amazing power presentations, right? That create all these visualizations, that can create all these stories to tell, to do a business case, right? But where is that data coming from? Right? Where are those pictures coming from? Right. So I think that's where I would see it. And I'm really excited to be partnering up with the departments here at the universities to try to kind of go in as a lecturers, kind of say, hey, once you get out of school, this is what you're going to do. Right. These are some of the basic skills that are, at least from my age and older, and I'm very young, by the way.
That's another thing that I've noticed, that a lot of people say it's oh, I'm dating myself and think that they're old. I'm like, I don't find that I'm that old. And a lot of people who are my age are like, oh yeah, I feel so old.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, I think we used to do that in our 20s and as a joke, and it kind of stuck with us.
Oh my God, yes. Lisa, I'm an elder millennial, right? If you really want to do the math, I'm a second generation. I'm a second year elder millennial, which I like to call. I've coined myself as an elder, right, in the millennial spectrum, right?
Which iPhone generation are you? Hmm. Well, cool. It was really good to catch up, but wanted to learn a little bit if you had some words of wisdom for the HR leaders and HR generalists who are looking to get into data and perhaps clean up their HRIS data. What are some of the things that they could be doing?
Yeah. So I would say start out simple. Excel. It's a
Mm,
really great. I mean, it's time old classic tool. You know, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I think that's a really great starting point. Learn a little bit of tricks of the trade to Excel. Learn about different types of formulas. Learn a little bit about Power Query. That's a really great introduction to take you kind of to those next levels. And if you really enjoy doing some of that, enjoy doing some of the coding, the formula creations, the complex formulas or sheet integrations or combinations, then you can kind of start looking at, oh, wow, what's the next level from Excel, right? And then kind of
mm.
start out there. So don't be scared of the data. Love the data. It is your best friend to tell you a beautiful story and really get you to that executive strategic level of a role or position you really want to get to. Short and sweet.
All right, awesome. Thank you for being on the show, Alex. This
Thank
was
you.
super informative and really interesting conversation about where we're going as a field overall and the importance of data, having clean data, and then using it to tell the great narratives.
Thank you so much. I mean, I hope to come back again. I'd love to help wherever I can. So yeah, thank you. This was fun. I mean, I tried to keep my jokes to a minimum.
Your jokes are great. All right, and thank you everyone for listening and tuning in. Subscribe to the podcast, and I'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.